Hello and welcome to PerchPeek Pods, the only show where you get in-depth interviews with some of the world's leading global mobility experts. I'm Paul, founder of PerchPeek, the modern way to relocate employees. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Karen Hale, Senior Manager of Global Mobility at Unity. Karen, thank you for coming on. Introduce yourself to the community and tell them a little bit about your GM background and the sort of wide variety you've seen.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's exciting to have this new podcast. I've been enjoying your show, so happy to be part of it. By way of introduction, I'm Karen Hale. I lead the global mobility, which is inclusive of all immigration as well as relocation and contingent workforce programs at Unity Technologies. Unity is a tech company that creates tools, platform support for those that want to create interesting, immersive, digital virtual experiences, including largely the gaming industry, as well as certain, industrial commercial uses in car manufacturing and economic development boards and a bunch of interesting things. I've been in global mobility close to 20 years now. I feel ancient. So I've seen a lot of teams move along the way. I'm based out of Austin, Texas. Unity's headquartered in San Francisco, but was originally founded in Denmark. I've been here about 2.5 years, have a small global team. But prior to that, started my career in the Big Four at Ernst & Young on the human capital side, so outsourcing consulting. Also have worked at a couple RMCs and in a couple of other previous corporate roles. So I've been around for a while.
Yeah, and you've seen that full spectrum, Big Four, RMC, couple of really big in-house jobs as well. So I couldn't ask for a better guest to dig into some meaty topics today. And when we set up the pod, I knew I wanted to get you on. Particularly, I first had the sort of pleasure of getting to know you when you were at BD, and I was always struck by your sort of desire to improve things for the employee and advocate for them. And I think that's translated through your work at Unity. You've worked across so many different, outsourced consulting, as you said, at EY, RMCs, in-house. Tell us about your perspective on advocating for employee experience, because it's so easy to get lost in that world. So what's your view on how you can do that effectively?
Yeah, to me, employee advocacy is a little bit different than employee experience. I know we talked in the recent years about employee experience a little bit. Employee experience to me is about kind of the roadmap, the standard processes, the journey that the employee takes. Are the steps efficient? Are they user friendly? Kind of just the normal process work well for them. However, I think advocacy comes in when things aren't working well, right? Or sometimes they're even in our capacity as HR professionals on the back end of things the employee may not ever even know have been going on. So how do we solve problems, put them in the best position, look out for their well-being and success? So again, some of those are employee facing issues. Obviously, if they have a crisis, they get to the airport, the airline won't let them board the plane because they don't think their immigration documents are in order. That's a moment for advocacy that the employee's well aware of. But there are many other opportunities that happen behind the scenes in our conversations with finance, legal, corporate tax, HR, our other HR colleagues, our suppliers, that we can, really help drive like the situation and look out for something that will be impactful to the employee, something that positions them even in difficult times. We've recently gone through rounds of layoffs here at Unity, but how do we position the situation where we're looking out for their best interests? And I think it's really kind of our sacred trust in this business to do that for them, whether they know we're doing it or not.
So much to dig into there, I think, and thank you for such a good distinction between experience and advocacy, and experience being sort of the standard building blocks really of your program, and advocacy being beyond that. I wanted to, if you felt comfortable, go into it a little bit on advocacy, particularly if a company's gone through layoffs or gone through a difficult period, which I know over the last 18 months or so, a lot of people in the community have had to deal with that. Are you able to sort of speak about things you've tried to do to advocate employees at difficult times, and techniques that you've seen work well?
Yeah, I mean, like all other things, communication's key here. We talk about the seat at a table, but this is, having the seat at the table or creating your seat at the table. Like I say, sometimes it doesn't just come to you. You kind of have to force it.
Yeah.
Force yourself into the conversations and constantly remind people. This may impact my employees that are holding, work visas. This may impact employees who are relocating, and make sure that they don't forget to include you in the conversations. But it's really critical. I would say, when it comes to the sad, difficult times like layoffs, unfortunately, lots of us in tech have experienced in the last couple of years. There are things we can do on the back end. If we can get that conversation started early, it's, obviously highly confidential and proprietary. We can't share it with the employees or their managers. But if we can have an understanding of where the business is going, which employees may be impacted, then we can look at things like, is there an employee on the, that may be impacted that's in the process of preparing to move? Maybe we figure out a way without revealing confidential information to help postpone that. Or if an employee that's recently moved at company request, it's a way to flag behind the scenes to legal, HR, business partners, this is going to be problematic. They've just recently moved and put all this time, money, resources, even if we've covered some of that, into getting settled in a new location. It's going to be very disruptive to get bad news at this point. We can't always change the outcome. The business has to do what the business has to do, but we can try to soften the landing.
Yes.
To the best of our ability. For people on immigration status, whether they've relocated or not, I always turn to mind to everybody how sensitive job changes are for these individuals, especially bad news with reductions, because we're not just, it's traumatic for any of us that love our jobs and put ourselves, our whole hearts into a job, to get bad news that your job's being eliminated. But for individuals that are on work visas, have temporary status, it's more than that. It's not just their job. It's their whole life has now been disrupted. Can they stay in the country where they're currently living? Are they going to have to pull their kids out of school and pack up and move and sell a house and all that on very short notice? Depending on the country, your windows of how much time you get is very very small. Some countries are more generous than others, but certainly, it's, whatever we can do to position it. So like one of the conversations, internally is there's this, it may be called in HR world, it's pylon, pay in lieu of notice.
Yeah.
For people that are on immigration status, pylon is not a good option. In a regular world, we all like cash, right? Give us the cash. But if you're on payroll is what matters. How much longer you can stay on payroll to start your job search before your clock starts ticking to leave the country. So, to be able to continue working your job longer is a better option to have that being able than getting the cash payout.
Yeah.
So there's just so many aspects of it. And again, often these happen very deep behind the scenes and the employees have no idea what's happening.
Yeah. But sometimes I'm sure you've seen situations where, if you haven't had that conversation or sent that message or whatever, the outcomes can be different, and you are in a position to influence, particularly at your level. Tell me about what that advocacy then is. Is it you're messaging people, just trying to, you mentioned earlier about trying to, I guess, like force your way into certain conversations. I know you're very good at raising awareness of global mobility. How do you think about trying to do that so you can have that influence?
I think it's building strong, credible relationships with people. I'm not always right. None of us are, but just kind of everyone knowing that you're coming from a place of best intent and you're really trying to support the needs of the employees and look out for their, again, what I see as their best interest. people need to understand when I go into conversation with the legal or HR, they know. In fact, they're funny now that I've been here 2.5 years. I got a slap last night and somebody was saying something and they're like, oh, I can hear Karen, because I was on the thread, but it wasn't direct. The comment wasn't direct to me. And he's like, in parentheses, I can hear Karen telling me that I need to, like, this isn't going to work. Like, you can look at a better date for a payroll transfer or whatever. So, again, it's just getting the knowledge and helping, put that out there. I think another thing that's critical is having that relationship with the employees. So, like I said, there's a lot of these conversations, especially in these unfortunate situations that happen behind the scenes before the employee knows it's coming, or they may suspect, but before it's officially communicated. The other part of it is we have to be ready as a team as soon as the notifications go out to be on standby, because generally, especially for somebody that's on a work visa or is relocated recently, they get bad news. Generally, as soon as they get bad news, their next call is going to be to our team. Yeah. What does this mean for me? What is the impact? Am I going to get support moving back to my home country? How long can I stay in this country before I have to leave? And so it's so hard for my team. I mean, it's hard for us. A lot of times we get them fresh off bad news and they're still angry. They're sad. It's almost like being a little bit of a therapist, because we're, some of the first people they're sharing this information with. Yeah. But then again, we have to be ready to kind of say, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. Be ready with as many answers as we can. Okay, maybe we don't know if we're going to relocate you back at this point, but we're having those conversations. We promise we'll be with you through this. We'll keep you updated. Things of that sort. So there's kind of the two sides. There's the back end that we do internally that's invisible, and then the front end that, to be there to support the employee, treat them with kindness in a hard time, even if we can't get them the answers they want to hear.
Yeah, and I think it's so inspirational, Karen, that you are so thoughtful about trying to support people. And it's a great thing about global mobility in general is that people are very passionate about your space, but it's very inspirational that you do so much behind the scenes, as you say, that often isn't appreciated, to try and give people a softer landing. And it's the last 18 months in tech have been incredibly tough, and you've really seen how difficult, particularly in the US, you must say, the timelines are not long, and it's really hard. So, anything.
Don't get me wrong. I much prefer dealing with the happy times. Everything goes smoothly, and everybody's having there's no hitches. It's perfect. Everybody's comfortable, and things are they see a great career path ahead. But I think that's the reality of the business. Our business is really unique, I think, even within HR, because we deal with people holistically. Like,
exactly.
Other parts of HR, benefits and things affect people's personal lives, but I don't think any other function inside a company is as intimately involved with people as we are. Because, like I said, what we do really affects not just their work life, but their home life as well. Their families, their children, their pets. And so I think that's a great response, a huge responsibility that sits on our shoulders. And it's easy some days and some moments to lose sight of it, because it's just task, check the box, get this done, get this off my, get this email, get this off my to-do list. But I think we should never lose sight, and we need to bring ourselves back. Remember why we're doing it, and the really critical difference we make. It can be positive or negative. On the individual.
It's so true, and I think particularly almost in stressful times for the business, it can be even easier to forget about the personal nature. And we would say internally, like, when you relocate, you get a window into someone's soul, because it is a stressful time for them, their family, their pets, as you mentioned. And when you are in a position of influence, like a supplier in your case, or in-house, and you can really influence outcomes for them. Pilot example is so great, right? If you can get them another month, 2 months of being on payroll, that is an incredible outcome at the end of the day. And that is sort of a privilege of the position if you can influence in that way.
Yeah, and again, we're not doing it for credit or kudos. I'm not sharing these examples to, try to get positive feedback. I think it's just the right thing to do. I think, again, it's that responsibility we hold for our companies, for our employees, for our communities where we're based. And I think it's just, important that we don't lose sight of that big picture and really, how do we make good situations even better? And how do we take bad situations and hopefully soften?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's such a powerful position. And as you say, it's relative to lots of positions, even though you're not doing it for kudos or but there is often such a clear through line between advocacy and the outcome for an individual at the end of it, which is pretty satisfying relative to lots of internal teams. So really sort of inspiring words. Thank you for that. I want to change tack slightly and move on to perhaps more of the employee experience side. So you said sort of some of the advocacy piece, which is super interesting. In terms of that employee experience, I know something that as soon as I came into the industry has been buzzing, and probably before that around core flex and the sort of pros and cons of transitioning from a managed approach to a core flex policy. I know you have experience of lots of different policy types and have strong views on it. So tell me, as a starter for 10, your sort of overall perspective on core flex policies.
So I think there's no one right answer for a program. I think you need to, the answer should be different for every program. One thing I'm always cautious of when I go into a conversation with anyone, and of course, core flex has been kind of trendy lingo in the industry over the last few years. I think it's important to dive down into that conversation and say, when you say core flex or flexibility, what does that mean to you? Because I think there's so many different ways to implement it. It can mean different things to different people. So I would venture to guess most programs have a degree of flexibility. How and where and when it's implemented may be different. So even within a more traditional program that has a structured package, you can still have flexibility. You could offer, cash in lieu. You could offer furniture allowance instead of a household goods shipment, or an either or. You can. There's different ways to do flexibility. You can have kind of lump sums or allow reimbursement for certain items that may be specific to certain families. Pet shipments, that's not going to apply to everyone, but maybe you offer it, and so that's flexibility to support the family, or something for supporting the children. Again, flexibility because everyone is going to have children. But but when you talk about core flex, that there's so many ways to implement that. We've seen dollars, we've seen points, we've seen which are comparable but different ways of doing the same thing. There's options where the business picks what's provided as core. You have a core, but for flex, there's options where the employee picks what they get under flex. Sometimes it's both. The company picks part and the employee picks part. So it's a key phrase, but again, I think it's important to have a lot of conversation around what is it that you're really meaning, and when you choose to look at your own program, which one will actually fit.
Yes. So, again, so much I want to dig into, because as you say, without more context, it's basically impossible to say good, bad, right? You need the context on the program and what you actually mean. Let's take a couple of those strands and pull at them a little bit. So dollar versus points. What's your sort of high level perspective on pros and cons of, lots of people will be aware, but dollars is normally you give someone $10,000 and say you can spend up to that, or equivalent points, you sort of convert that into points, and maybe household goods is X points and temporary accommodation is Y points. What's your perspective on pros and cons of those approaches?
I think it's going to largely depend on your company culture. That's probably my answer for most things.
Yeah, I love it.
Development. Some companies are, and I worked at a few across the years, are very much about don't share the budgets with the employees. We don't want them to see the dollars. So in that case, you probably don't want to use the dollars approach. Points might be better if you're in that kind of culture. On the other hand, there are companies that the philosophy is, let them see the dollars. They need to know how much we're investing in them. Points don't mean anything. If they understand what we're really spending, they may, one, be more appreciative, to kind of, treat this with more care, because they can really see a true dollar value. And of course, it's a little bit of semantics because we're speaking, and usually it's U.S. dollars that are information, and one's coming from a U.S. dollar or going to a U.S. dollar economy. So how clearly it translates may depend on your personal situation, but yeah. So I think very much cultural, company culture, philosophical decision there. There are some things that personally I've struggled with a little bit in kind of that the whole either option. And one of those is really around, and I know a lot of companies, because of this very reason, have carved out something, say like a household goods shipment. They've carved it out of their dollars or their points, because household goods shipments are so variable. And over the last few years, they've been really volatile as well from a pricing perspective. So like one of the challenges is, okay, do you set the dollar value, but then two different families, one's using a bigger part of their budget for the same benefit that somebody else doesn't have to use as big of a budget. Same thing with points. Do you tie it to the dollars? In which case, you get instead of being how many points they have to use that, get that benefit, it's going to vary person to person. Or do you make it a flat amount of points for everyone, but then on the back end, your budget's going to be all over the place. The actual loss of it here. So there's some interesting philosophical things to unwind there, and you really have to figure out what'll work. And for your population, how strict is your finance department going to be on wanting to know as accurate as possible on a budget?
Yeah.
Or are they okay with saying it's going to fall in this range?
Yes.
Yeah. So if it falls in the range, then we're good. So lots of interesting things, but you have to know your stakeholders, and
exactly.
Personally, I don't love those conversations with finance. So whatever, I don't do things just to make finance happy, but I definitely don't want to do things to make them unhappy.
100%. And I think definitely where I definitely agree there is it can often seem quite elegant going for points, but then sometimes finance are like, well, why is it so different to the budget?
Yeah.
The hiring manager is like, why is this way different? And it can be quite challenging from that point of view. You can overcome it, but it's definitely not to be sniffed out. And I think that point on employee appreciation as well is great point overall on company culture, but sometimes they treat it a little bit more dearly if they sort of see the dollars attached rather than the points. Are like, wow, that's quite a lot of money they're spending on relocating me, is often the reaction, which is can be good, can be bad. It does depend on your company culture. Next one, that was incredible wisdom. Hoping for some more on this one. Core flex, is it the business and the manager choosing which benefits are core, which benefits are flex, or is it the employee choosing which benefits are core, which benefits are flex? I'm sure you've seen both sides. What's your lesson learned from that?
You're putting me on the spot here.
I know. Company culture.
The answer is always going to be company culture.
Of course. Yeah.
Actually work. I will say, in a prior life, I did work in an early adopter of Core Flex, and we had quite a robust program. It was tiered by job level, and then within each tier, we had what we call core, and then we had what we call business choices. Those were options the business got to select, and then employee choices, and those were happened there is the business picked how many employee choices they got, and then the employee picked which ones. They were all roughly equivalent from a cost standpoint. And so it might be like spousal career assistance, pet shipment. Those are like, there's a list of them, but they could pick which of those. And the business said, okay, they could pick two things. What I found in that case was it was administratively difficult in the sense that managers, thinks they don't understand the benefits. If you're letting the business pick, they don't understand what we do, and they shouldn't. So a lot of them don't move people very often, right? You have your frequent flyers, like certain businesses that move people a lot. But outside of that group, the average manager is not moving people that often. And so to go help them understand how to make the decisions is a lot of education, a lot of time investment. And a lot of times they're like, okay, those things, even if you come in with recommendations, like I think, and they're like, they may or may not know if the person owns a house or rents. They may or may not know how many kids they have. They may or may not know if they have, what their personal situation is. So a lot of times there's a lot of education, a lot of guesswork, and then you sometimes put the costs together, and then there's like, oh, whoa. And then you're back to revisiting it again. So it can be challenging in that regard. So I definitely lean towards giving the employee more choice, partly just for that reason. But you do have to make sure, obviously, budget's available, managers understand. If you're in a really employee flex situation, you're still going to have to do maybe to a lesser extent, but a degree of education to help them understand, okay, you may have two people moving and they may be getting entirely different benefits because they're picking, right?
Yes.
And again, with employees, it's the same thing. It's, do they know what they need and they don't need if they're not frequent movers, right? People very quickly look at cultural training saying, I don't need that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a common one, right? I even see it with my program. I don't need cultural training. And you're like, but, they're like, oh, I'm in Europe all the time, or I lived in Europe 20 years ago, and, years ago. And you're like, okay, but, that's different than supervising employees there and, integrating your family into a community. And you might not have had kids then and understand the schooling system and, those kinds of things. So,
there's so much wisdom.
People know. Do they know what they need or don't need? I don't know if it depends on the person.
Yeah. And I think so many nuggets in there. Firstly, so many.
That's a nice way of saying I'm talking too much.
No. It's a nice way of saying there's just so much wisdom. I'm going to try and sort of collect some of it and play it back, because I think the first thing that really, really resonated was so many sort of members of the GM community speak about wanting to get more buy-in across the business and help them understand. And so many people miss relocations because the business just doesn't understand and go, black ops missions and stuff like that and just ignore mobility. And the more complicated you make it for them, whether that be having to explain benefits or having to try and explain points, the less likely that is. And that churn you described is just, it's annoying for everyone. It's annoying for mobility, it's annoying for them. So definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And I think, again, is you have to look at the culture. You have to,
Exactly.
I mean, there's other things. You have to look at your team, what their skill set is, what our bandwidth is. If you have a heavily intensive consultative program that you're going to spend a lot of time, explaining to managers or employees, that's resources that aren't being spent elsewhere.
Exactly.
And so as a side, like is that where you want to use your time? It's not a right or wrong. There's no bad. It's just you have to make those kinds of choices as you're developing a program and implementing a program.
Exactly. And particularly with, I think, a lot of teams being skinnier than they used to, being asked to do more with less, that sort of operational burden is quite heavy. And then on the employee side, I think something that is often overlooked in core flex is, are you going to try and cap the budget, or say it's sort of like depends on the benefits that they pick? And on the employee side, that's really where the education still comes in, that if it's uncapped and it's, pick household goods or pick temporary accommodation or whatever it might be, or pick cultural training, you are going to end up with that variety in budget, which is obviously fine. And then the third one, which just felt like such a good learning, is what should really be core at the end of the day. And some of those other benefits, like cultural training, as you mentioned, they're difficult to educate infrequent flyers, to use your terminology, and so it can be hard. Maybe you do want to advocate for them to be included as as core, or whether you call it core flex or just a benefit that everyone gets option to.
Yeah, it is interesting working with people and kind of seeing what they think and what you think, having gone through, we go through many moves with people and hear the pros and cons, but the people that we're supporting don't. So it's fresh and they don't know what they don't know. So whether it's a manager or an employee, so our job to support them, but also to make the program meaningful, impactful, and user friendly. In my opinion, they need to be
I think that user friendliness is and building for your customers, the employees, and the hiring managers, rather than for the internal team. And I definitely agree. Probably a whole separate podcast on they don't know what they don't know, because we'll go down a massive rabbit hole if we dig into that too much. But I think the aspiration of company culture being at the core, and your program as well. Who are you relocating? What are their pain points? Trying to bring data into that conversation. All such critical points.
And I didn't mention it, but there's also a DEI factor here. That I try to keep in mind when we're making changes to our program. We're looking at updating policies. What I don't want to find, and I don't think it would ever be intentional on anyone's part, but I don't want to look back at the end of the year and look at our data of who we moved and find out that for some reason, women or some other underrepresented group in our demographics ended up getting less than other employees. So that's something else to be cautious of in program development. It doesn't have to be equal per se. You don't have to give the exact same benefits to every person, but how do you make sure it's fair?
Exactly. And I think, how do you make sure it's fair and it's not just whoever negotiates best, kind of either on the employee or on the manager side, truthfully, because it's just a surefire way to not get that. And it can seem for an individual not a big deal to negotiate, but at that program level, you don't want to be seeing that sort of inequity across the program. And another super interesting point that I think everyone in the community will recognize, that a manager is saying, no, we have to give this person this, or an employee saying, I'm not going to do this unless X, Y, Z, and just trying to sort of build policies that sort of temper.
Yeah, managers are funny in my experience. You'll have some that are so generous and give them everything, and then you'll have others that they just need $3,000, put their suitcases in the car, right? And you're like, no,
and
not necessarily no,
And it's so, and they're like, oh, well, I spoke with them and they said they'd be delighted with this, and and it's kind of it's very funny, and it's sort of it's quite tricky to sort of build consistent policies in that environment, right, where managers have input, because it's people are there sort of saying, okay, it's like everyone has an opinion, but you've got to put some stakes in the ground somewhere. Final question I wanted to come on to Cameron is, as you know, we have a tradition of the previous guest leaving a question for the next guest, and thankfully I think this is a question that you'll be very interested in and passionate about, because I know you're a big advocate for technology in general, and in particular where AI might be able to help within the sphere of global mobility. So specifically, question for you is, in the day of the life of a global mobility manager or a senior global mobility manager right now, imagine sort of 100% of your day. Where are you spending time today that you think AI might be able to supercharge in 5 years' time and either completely eliminate or really speed up?
You're right. I do love tech. I love pushing forward tech, and mobility is kind of a passion. That being said, I'm not a super techie geek. And so whether I could do it myself was probably never going to happen, but I love seeing others do it and supporting those efforts. AI, I think the potential is unlimited. Where I really like to, or I think there's more immediate value that we'll be seeing is some of the abilities to kind of summarize notes from calls or email threads that are 20 responses long, and they can kind of give you the high points in 3 sentences, so you don't have to go back and read 20 responses of people asking clarifying questions, and things like that. I mean, that I think is near term kind of future that will save us a bit of time. Longer term, I'm really excited to think of the potential with things like immigration and tax. There's still so much with the bureaucracy around those and the manual work that has to be done on our suppliers as well as on us. But just, things like like we spend unnecessary time in my mind, but it's necessary, but it's not valuable going back and forth on trying to get job descriptions high in order to support immigration petitions, things like that. So things that won't require as much back and forth, and you can really have tools that support us in those immigration forms and tax forms. Hopefully, could be more automated. We'll still have to review them and sign them. But less provision of data, integration between systems. I think that's what the thing is.
Yeah.
I'll say the one thing that scares me is compliance, because I know governments are getting smarter about compliance and they're going to start integrating their systems. And now we all know when we travel internationally, our passports are scanned, facial recognition, biometrics with fingerprints. There's no more secret. You can't things that used to happen in the past that you got away with aren't going to fly. And that's probably the one thing that scares me about technology right now is people are going to understand if you break the rules, you're going to get caught. And every day that you move forward with technology makes that more likely.
100%. I think that's almost like a sort of a bit of a dirty secret of a lot of companies and mobility programs right now. Is like, just as long as they don't tell us, then we don't know, and it's all fine. And that is going to go away, as you say. It's sort of like the people are going to get caught, and governments are going to be looking for tax dollars or fines ultimately, and they're going to come after big companies, right? Like nobody gets in trouble for that. I love this takeaway that actually I feel like just a lot of sort of day-to-day soft stuff, meeting notes, call recordings, long email chain summarize it, kind of that everyone gets value from, I think is probably the biggest thing for global mobility managers, because it doesn't need to be purpose built at the start. It's like just general tools that apply to everyone and are already there in such a big way.
Yeah, I mean, just the ability to get an initial start on a policy document or a presentation deck, things like that. Even though we'll still have to do work, just it's going to cut time. It's going to cut all that startup sitting in front of a screen thinking, how do I write this email? How do I start this presentation? And then you think it. So,
100%.
I've been dabbling in AI. I'm not going to call myself an expert, but I dabble with the Chat GPT, and now we have an internal one that we can use. This firewall. So
good.
It's protect the data. It's fun. It's fun to I don't think. Yeah, we have to figure out how to use it better. I think a lot of people are super nervous and scared, and and when we're busy, we tend to just fall back.
Yeah,
we've always done things, but you've got to start thinking. And again, I'm excited to see what's coming, because I'm sure there's uses that I haven't even imagined yet.
Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely great for sort of speeding up. I'm not sure it's completing many things completely eradicating right now, but I'm certainly very excited about the immigration use cases, just because there's so much just back and forth in that process right now that feel, you look at it and you sort of think, okay, that's going to be pretty easy to automate a lot of that. So Karen, so much we could carry on talking about here. You've been an absolute all day. Exactly. I'll get in trouble for going on too long again, but you've been an absolute fountain of wisdom, as you have been since early in sort of our time in the industry. So thank you so much for being generous with your time, but more importantly your sort of stories of wisdom. I know people will take a lot, and sharing so openly as well. It's been
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. We'll do it again soon. Cheers, Karen.
Okay. That's the deal.